Welcome back, everybody. Excited about this week. And I'm excited because we've got Benjamin Neville with us. And you know what? Most of the people up to this point I've worked with or had an association with in industry on this podcast, and Benjamin was referred to me. So we actually don't know each other. And I'm very excited to get to know this Australian today. So we are quite global, very excited about what we're going to learn today. And Benjamin, welcome to the Mining Coach podcast.
Thanks, Christo, for having me. I've seen a couple of your videos, and I've heard of you, and hence the third-party referral, and exciting to do a bit of a deep dive into topics that we both find mutually interesting. So thanks for having me.
Yes, and you have chosen like this long list. Normally, when I ask people choose your topics, they like that's 3, maybe 4. I can't remember anybody choosing like 4, but you've chosen like 6 or 7. So I'm excited. We're going to have lots of conversation today. But before we kick off, Benjamin, it's important that people get to know you a little bit. And don't you want to tell our audience who's this person? What are you about? Tell us a bit about your career.
Yeah, so I, like most people in the mining space, found my way into the industry through a degree. So I selected engineering straight out of high school. I did mechatronics engineering. I found that to be rewarding in terms of the fundamentals. It provides you across mechanical, electrical, software disciplines. We did touch a little bit on some of the structural and civil elements as well within that degree, which was interesting. Found myself into industry, doing engineering consultancy, drumming up my own clients. Within 3 months of commencing in the industry, learning the art of extracting needs and wants from clients and developing solutions and strategies to enable those. I've been fortunate to start my career in Brisbane in Queensland, which is on the east coast of Australia. I've covered a lot of the rural towns, mining sites and such throughout Queensland, some of the oil and gas sites as well. And then my path in career has transformed through some largely government work that I did in Sydney, New South Wales, which is effectively the corporate capital of Australia. And then I was at a bit of a crossroads where, one thought was maybe move overseas, try something different. And I was tapped on the shoulder by a mining company, BHP, to come to Perth, and started my journey here 6 years ago, and I haven't left. I've really settled here, and this is where I am now. And through my time here, I've decided recently, within the last year, to launch a consulting business, Select Management Group. So we can talk a little bit about that and what we do there as well. But really just thrive in the industry of mining and some of the connecting sectors and add value along the way. So that's my journey.
That's amazing. I like I don't think I've ever heard that, like extracting the needs and wants of your customers, and that's the art of that. And tell us about this, what you're doing in the Seligna Group and your consulting, because it's so important that we are good listeners and helping a younger version of ourselves. Myself also, in the consulting space, enjoying working with mining clients and adding value to them. But your journey, what is the work that you as a team are doing? What are you busy with?
So we get contacted by, whether it's government agencies or whether it's private companies. It could be owner operators, or it could be contracting entities, and we come in and provide different services. So, for example, in the government space, one of my recent engagements was to enter a government entity, help them come forward with help them develop a strategy for implementation or a roadmap of change within the business. And part of the work was gathering individuals that held positions in different departments or different spheres of influence within this particular agency, and manipulate and move them forward along a common journey where a common set of goals and objectives were able to be endorsed or to have the stakeholder buy-in of these different groups of people to enable development of a roadmap of change, which then involved engaging specialist providers and executing and moving things forward from an implementation point of view. But really the skill set there was that exact thing, the extracting the wants and needs, understanding what the negotiables are, the non-negotiables, foreseeing roadblocks, learning processes, defining ways to overcome those in a regimented way to enable a timely success and do something which typically might take a few years to get step change, and moving that down into a compressed window in 3 to 6 month execution timeline. So, so the consulting thing, it's interesting that you and I share that, right? Like people want to be listened to.
Yeah.
That's human nature. And sometimes, if let's use engineering as an example, because it's a great world where engineers are involved at almost every step of the way in some way, shape, or form.
Mm.
If an engineer puts forward a solution to the client, the client isn't going to know whether that solution works or not. Right? They'll just say, "Well, you're the engineer, and it must work." Right? That's if we condense the conversation between an engineering representative and a non-engineering representative, that's in essence what most of the conversation comes down to. But in essence, and I think you've seen the meme, right? Like it's the way the client sees it, the way the customer pays for it, the way the engineer sees it. You get these like a tire hanging on a tree versus a roller coaster. You've probably seen that meme a handful of times in your career. We can often go for the gold-plated tech, or we can often, build a bridge when the client wanted a runway or an airplane. But sometimes just got to listen. What are their concerns and their problems? Like, what issues are their organization facing? It could be a transformational change that they need rather than an engineered solution. So that art form is what we bring to people when we sit down with them and explore what help they might need to move things forward.
I love, I love the fact that your focus is on people. So management consulting with people in mind, your slogan there. And as you say, the people side of the business is probably 90% of it. So there's the technology solutions are there, the best solutions are out there. But if people are not going to adopt and use it, and one of the topics that what you've just started uncovering now is change, and how difficult is it for organizations, and what have you experienced with change processes, like a company. I also know you're a project professional, so you've these big projects that one implement or start at a mine or a site or an operation. It doesn't have to be a mine; it can just be a business or a factory. Whatever these change projects are, they bring about so much change for people. It upsets their ways of doing things. What would you advise a younger version of yourself that's actually facing, all of this change? So, this change is being done to them, and this project is on its way. And how do you deal with that as a younger Benjamin, as a younger Christo?
Yeah, and I love that your themes in your podcast is providing that advice, and hopefully the audience and the viewers, some of them are in that category of being new into the industry. I would say embrace change, learn what's new, try new things, encourage yourself to make errors and learn from those errors as early as you possibly can. You can only transform an industry or transform a company by taking the first step. There are some common phrases people say. They say the one thing that's constant is change. that is true. And the other thing that people say is that you come across those that are afraid of change, which is also true. So why would people be afraid of something that's always constant? Where does the fear set in? Does it set in early on in their life? Does it set in maybe when they get to a point in their career or within a company or organization where perhaps they feel that things are optimal, things don't need improvement, things are working as they are? We hear the phrase, we've been doing this for the last 20 years, this is the best way of doing it.
Exactly.
You've probably heard that countless times in your career. And whilst it might be true, it might work that way, and it might have worked that way for 20 years. You never know what's around the corner. And I think, how do you communicate it to those that are young or fresh, or younger versions of ourselves even, is use your brain like a sponge. Spend time with different people, spend time with different disciplines. Find a really good lawyer, find a good accountant, find a good engineer. You find different types of engineers. Find entrepreneurs, find senior managers, find other interns in different fields to you, and just use the network of people to learn from each other and share. We can only all move forward if enough people want to make the change as well. And that's the advice that I would give.
I like that. Yeah, and I must tell you, so many times in my career as well, where we've like implemented technology projects at a mine, like we were like rolling out the Wi-Fi underground, real-time monitoring, and people say, why do you want to see every second of the day what we're doing, and you want to spy on us? And how do you why do you want this? And even if you introduce cameras underground, or you introduce cameras in a workplace, so people really do not take it easy in terms of change. And there's a lot of suspicion involved in a lot of our projects. How do we help people with, understanding a project is good for them? You've done projects, you've been involved with projects. How do we sell that? What would your advice be?
Like most things, there are different steps along the way. And I typically find that when you could use the art and framework of PMBOK, from a project delivery point of view. And when it comes to managing stakeholders, there's a tool available there, for example, that talks around the power interest matrix. And I'm sure you've seen that tool yourself and experienced different tools that are of a similar nature. And ultimately, in order for a change to be effective, you need uptake, right? And I think some of the work you do is around organizational change as well, Christo. So the uptake, monitoring the effectiveness of the uptake is a critical part to that. And often, especially when it comes to, say, frontline personnel, whether they're in operations or whether they're in maintenance, they have goals, targets, objectives, and KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what helps them in the process is when you leverage their maturity and understanding of their the way that they measure success, and if they're a metrics group or individual, for example, you use the elements of metrics by articulating to them that the positive uptake of this digital change or transformational process improvement is an enabler into securing more successful KPIs, which in turn, as most mining organizations, for example, work, will see a direct return to them in terms of a performance bonus, right? The company succeeds, individuals succeed. So in the end, when you find the levers or the avenues that make sense to different groups of people for different reasons and have their input along the way, you can often get a stronger outcome by them seeing the metrics and seeing the end result potentially unfold before it does unfold. And I find that to be incredibly effective.
I like that. When you said like getting the input along the way, I remember one of the projects I was involved with. So one of the things I loved doing was like going out every week and meeting the teams, and it was just a standard of us going into the caucus or the shift handover sessions and be with people. And so some of the team said to me, and it was a theme. It's like I would like for 3 weeks in a row, 4 weeks, maybe more. I can't recall exactly. They would tell me, Christo, when you started this project, why didn't you involve us from the start? Why didn't you involve us from the start? You know, we could have told you that this and that would have not worked. And, you know, you sometimes from a head office or a corporate office, you've got these ideas and plans, but why don't you involve the people that do this every day? And they would have told, they would have told you this is not going to work. But here's how, and they were, excuse me, but they would also, I love the fact that people would come up with solutions saying, you know, this is a better way of doing, this is something else that we can do. And just that, the art of, as you said earlier, listening, the art of listening, and then empowering people along the way to say, look, we hear you, and this is what we'll change, and this is how we're going to make a change in this case. It builds trust.
Do you need some one-on-one coaching? Do you know that theminingcoach.com offer these services as part of Comena Consulting? Comena means grow, and most top athletes and sport teams all have coaches to grow and become better. Why don't you reach out to us by sending us an email, and you will qualify for getting your first coaching session absolutely free. Contact us at christo@theminingcoach.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Some of the topics that you're also passionate about is leadership, and we sort of started to pivot now to leadership. But why is this so important to you?
I have been very lucky in my life, even as a kid. I've had excellent leaders, coaches, mentors, teachers. You know, often you're influenced by the authority figures in your life. And the earlier you're influenced, the more you recognize the power of the influence, and you continue to seek that influence. I've had some very respectful line leaders of mine in both private and other industries. And for me, I remember talking to one of my mentors once, and I said to him, I said, how do you promote your messaging so confidently every time you do like an executive presentation in front of the board and in front of executive committees, and like how do you know so much information, right? Because as a young sponge, I'm like, I want that level of sponge available to me. And I learned something quite interesting from him, which I was actually very surprised to hear about when we were leveling with each other. And he said to me, he goes, Benjamin, you know, I surround myself with people that know things that I don't. And he uses the knowledge of of other people that he's come across in his life to feed him enough information where he doesn't need to spend the 2,000 hours, 20,000 hours learning that particular thing. And for me, I was prepared early on in my career to do those 20,000 hours, right? I'm like, I want all of the hours, I want all of the knowledge. And I learned early on that that's important to do your own learning, but it's also important to recognize when someone else might have a deeper interest or a deeper understanding or a particular path that they're setting themselves on, which might be different to yours, recognizing and tapping into them when you need to elevate your situation or elevate the situation of the team around you. And the knowledge of relying upon others and building trust comes from coaches and mentors. You know, you teach people that success is it's team oriented. It's society oriented, it's community oriented. A whole country succeeds, for example, or organization or otherwise. We do this together. We're not in it for a race for ourselves. We're in it for our friends, our families, our teammates, our colleagues. That's what we do. That's what is important to me. I've always seen it that way. I look back to even when I was a student studying engineering, for example. I just remember long days, late nights, where I would find all of the whiteboards that had wheels, and we would, myself and others would wheel them all into this one big room, and that was kind of where we would all go and learn from each other, during the tough times, during group assignments, exam studying, what have you. And I still remember the great debates on a late Friday afternoon where we would have all different colored pens all over the whiteboard, people, different perspectives on how to solve different technical engineering problems, different approaches, different, ways of filtering data or whatever it might be, whatever technical debate was on at the time. And I remember those were the times that I had the fondest memories of learning in groups. And those are the fondest memories that I've had in industry and executing in teams, is dragging together the brainstorming sessions, getting to a particular point and saying, is this still working for us? What else can we consider? And putting it out to the floor, getting the feedback from the team, whether it's, a white collar team, whether it's a mixture with frontline workers, blue collar staff as well. Getting people to express themselves and creating that environment where it's okay for the quietest person in the room to get the microphone and speak. Everyone listens to them. I enjoy that. I think it's important that that environment is available to everyone.
Sure. So many powerful nuggets there. That's a mouthful. There are so many things taking away from that, Benjamin. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking the saying that goes that if that leader that you spoke about earlier, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong place. So surround yourself with people that know a lot more than you, but be willing to learn and give everybody a voice. There are so many things that you've touched on there. And leadership is such an important topic, even in the world right now. You see governments, you see elections taking place, you see, people are hungry for good leaders. And it's funny that I actually listened to John Maxwell, one of his latest podcasts, with him releasing his 90th book. And the latest one was on leadership, high road leadership is the book's title. And I've listened to a few podcasts and interviews on it. And really it's about the fact that as a human race, we just keep making the same mistakes. We just don't seem to learn from, the bad leadership examples in life. And it's so good that you've had such great examples and mentors and coaches and people in your life that helped you and inspire you. But I want to just talk a little bit more about this topic on leadership. What are the top leadership traits that are very close to you? Apart from, you've mentioned a few now about being able to listen and give people a voice. Are there any other top traits that you look for when you say, that's a good leader? I like that.
Look, there's so many options to pick from. The term collaboration comes in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by collaboration, just to delve into that a bit more, is you often find that when, say, setting a strategy, and you mentioned earlier on this call that in your example, some people in the front line felt perhaps they weren't involved in the collaboration early on.
Mm.
But let's not go there. Let's just talk about collaboration generally. Is you often find that when a strategy or a vision or a way of looking at a solution is put forward by a select few, which often it is, and every company operates as a pyramid structure. There's always a pointy end, right? The pointy end can be board of directors, can be CEO, can be maybe COO, can be, there's always a pointy end, right? So there's always a decision-making process that involves information getting to the top or getting to the level of delegation and decisions being made. But often what we miss as a group of people is we often think that the decision can't be reversed. So what I mean by that is it's important that when we exercise our options or exercise methods to achieve a goal, it's important that we use metrics to analyze and predict effectiveness or the cost of achieving that particular goal. But if we look at the idea of a continuous feedback loop, we don't often see that in investment decision making. We often don't have a process, or most businesses don't seem to have a process where a decision's been made, 12 months down the line into it, we don't think it's working, let's redo the decision. We often see what people refer to as like a supplementary approval or an additional approval, or where we seek extra money to do something extra on top of this. But we fall victims naturally to this idea of regret spent. You know, we go, we've already spent whatever it is over here. Let's keep adding to it because otherwise it's regret. Well, you know, the messaging sometimes needs to be, it's okay that we have, like, it's okay that that's failed. Maybe it's not okay that we failed in a way that's, you know, has an impact on the balance sheet. But the message to the shareholders and people investing in us, or however big the company is, needs to be, we want to make it okay to change tact and improve and learn. And unless you're measuring the effects of your decisions, and unless that's part of the ongoing decision-making evaluation process, you'll never know if your decision is good or bad. You know, some decisions you might not see the outcome for 5-10 years into the future. So you never know that the decision was bad at the time. And if you don't allow yourself the ability to measure incrementally over the lifespan of the change, how do you? So I would say to you that the collaboration side of and I would say the younger selves of you and I and the younger people in the industry is look at decisions that have been made and look to see if you feel that perhaps there's reasons why a difference or a step change could be warranted, and use your courage to draw from your peers and your colleagues and your mentors to learn the art of putting forward a business case and saying, hey, we think a change might be necessary for these reasons. And I say leadership would...
Making notes here. I'm listening.
And I would say most leaders who are in the good leadership category, as opposed to the ineffective or bad leadership category, most leaders would be open to listening to those concerns, especially if they're proposed in such a way that enables a healthy discussion around the objective rationale or the critique behind what it is that isn't quite working.
And how do we help a person struggling with, call it a very bureaucratic leader, where they do not give that collaborative culture? They're not the ones that create that environment where there's open and free how do we help people that are struggling with those type of leaders?
You know, it's sometimes, particularly in, say, government sectors, those that are empowered into those leadership roles, they're there for a long time, right? They're not there for a good time. They're there for a long time.
I've seen that. Absolutely. That's a great government's a great example of that.
You know, the thing is, you might not know what good looks like, right? If you're fresh in the industry, the first leader that you see your perspective, your data set, your sample size of what you can see, what you've experienced is one individual, right? Or one group of individuals. How do you help someone who is not demonstrating those leadership qualities? Sometimes it comes down to you expressing vulnerabilities or providing feedback. So there's different feedback models that you can learn about. One of them, some people call it as the SBI feedback model, which you're probably familiar with. So it's a situation, behavior, impact. So you as an individual going to a leader, you could say to the leader, hey, this is a situation that recently has transpired. These are the behaviors that you as a leader have portrayed to the team or to the objectives that we're trying to achieve, and the impact of those behaviors have been in such a way where these negative connotations or this disruption in the team has manifested in this particular way. And then you can loop back on that feedback model and say, you can add extra BI to the end of that, which is you articulate what the desired behaviors are that you would like to see in the leader or the decision or what have you, and then therefore what the desired impacts would be on the team or the objectives. And you as a fresh person, or you and I, fresh in the industry, maybe we wouldn't have the courage and knowledge to do that. But we might have the courage and knowledge to do that if we've had a good mentor, coach, leader that might not be within our organization who could listen objectively to what we're experiencing and provide us that guidance, for example. That is, managing upwards is an art, is a skill. Everyone has a boss. Even CEOs have bosses. Boards of directors have bosses. Everyone has someone that they answer to, and managing upwards is a skill that the earlier you practice, the stronger you'll get in the future at executing, and also the more open you'll be to listening to people when they're bringing concerns to you, which is effectively their way of managing upwards when you're in that leadership role yourself, for example.
Right. So we've spoken about collaboration. We've spoken about any other traits, leadership traits. You've spoken about inclusion and that. Any other leadership traits that stand out for you that you important to you? But there is a lot, but maybe the top few more, and why?
Look, there is a lot. I would say innovation is another one, but not innovation in the sense of the leader needing to do it themselves, but what we spoke about earlier, the courage and the ability to have the freedom to be able to innovate. And even if perhaps it fails, it doesn't quite work, the environment where innovation can take place again, and that's encouraged and welcomed within the approach to a solution. But I mean, how about you? That's my perspective, Christo. What do you see as, on the topic of leadership, what are other traits that come to mind that really resonate with you?
Yeah, that's a dangerous question. Asking me that, the topic I'm very, very passionate about. I think a lot is being so leading by example is important for me. So in the integrity there is, don't expect your team or people to do what you're not willing to do yourself. Never to. That is one integrity. I like the integrity, the honesty, the vulnerability, being open and honest. That's a big term. I think when people see the authentic you and there's no pretense, and you are willing to admit when you've gone wrong, your leadership wins trust. And so I think the trust element is one that is an outcome of leadership, but I think it's super important for me in leadership. And I had my leadership not always I'm trying to grow all the time, but it wasn't always hot. I mean, I would call people out in meetings, disrespectful way of addressing people, not understanding the mood in the room, not being able to read people. So there's a lot of, call it, more mistakes that I made in my leadership journey that helped me to do it better over the years. But I like what you are saying in terms of inclusion. The willingness to listen more. At one stage in my life, definitely I wasn't a good listener, and I really had to work really hard to talk less and listen more, and let people do the talking, the team, my leadership teams, and giving everybody an equal voice, not choosing or not having a select few that you work with, but working with your whole team equally. Yeah, so I think there's a lot that I think for me as in leadership that I like. I guess I'm fascinated by the topic. There's the enablement is one that also is high on my priority. I think a leader must enable people, and enablement is giving the tools, giving the means, giving the ability, the training. So sometimes it's a lack of people just not knowing what they don't know, and that's why they're not performing. And so if you can understand those gaps and enabling and giving them the tools, the means, the ability to actually be successful, you just see a mind shift change. Taking a real interest in people, I think the real interest in their families, they're showing that you prioritize their families, their loved ones in the same way that they do. Because I think, organizations don't realize that they won't be visiting you at the age of 75 when your children and grandchildren are there or not there. They won't ask you, hey, Benjamin, how are you doing? How are the kids? How are the grandkids? So I think a lot of what leaders should do is make sure that they manage the work-life balance for their team, and so that their team has got the freedom to perform at a high level, but also have got the ability to enjoy life and spend enough time with their loved ones, and then have that passion of bringing back to the work into your job your energy, because you have filled your cup with your family or your hobbies and had enough free time to actually not be drained all the time. Elena, the consulting space, it's a real problem that people are extremely stretched in just working, pushing their hours because the clients have got these pressing needs all the time. And if you're not going to look after that yourself, or make sure your team is looked after, the burnout will happen. One of the previous podcast guests spoke a lot about burnout, and I think it's a job of the leader to be the dipstick, to make sure that they check their people and that there's no burnout. So yeah, so I can keep us busy. You shouldn't be asking those questions. But yeah, those are the ones that stand out for me right now at this stage. And I'm not getting my work-life balance right either. I've been working extensively the last 3 weeks, and you have to make the time to take time out and recognize when your team is struggling, and help them to come back and have some normality back. But yeah, I'll pause there. You caught me off guard there.
One of the things that you mentioned was around empowerment and enabling, empowering people was one of the themes that you were mentioning. And one technique that I found quite effective, which is free and anyone can do this, is when you have a regulated team catch up or team meeting, using the idea of passing who chairs the meeting around the team can be interesting. You as a leader, yes, you should authoritatively chair the meetings that you're obligated to, but it's fun letting an intern chair a meeting, giving them the support and the enablement and the courage from the team to let them roll with it. Let the really technical, smart, supremely knowledgeable engineer who doesn't naturally control a room the opportunity to to chair a meeting, and you as the leader providing the almost like in 10-pin bowling, you're the bumpers. You help guide the ball back towards the strike, but you're letting people learn the technique of bowling a strike themselves. And I think the more people that understand the elements of successful teamwork, the successful collaboration, successful leadership, and the more opportunities people are given to do so, the stronger your team will become. I mean, you might have someone who, in a HR sense, might not be performing as an engineer, but might actually excel as a manager of a mine site, because the way that they bring people together, the skill sets that they apply there might never have been manifested before because they haven't been given that enablement. So you don't know what. And the great thing with say throwing chairs out to different people in different meetings, it doesn't have to be a largely technical meeting. It could be it could be a social committee style arrangement. It could be running a pre-start. It could be a few things where there's safety barriers for them to not fail, right? Like the agenda is fairly well structured. There's not going to be a heated debate, so you could bring different people up in different ways. But then even as a leader, you could pull them aside one-to-one afterwards and say, hey, what did you feel about running that meeting? And then getting the immediate feedback from them, and they can express themselves, whether they said they liked it, they want to do more. They can say, scariest thing I've ever done, but happy to do more. Or they might say, don't like it, don't ask me again. It's and you get to learn that by using the experience as an input into whether the progression is likely to be there or not. And I honestly think that that's a very valuable thing as a young person to seek that out, but as a young person to say yes when those opportunities are given to you. Don't shy away. If people stand around and look at you funny and take the approach of not supporting you and demeanor your authority or whatever it might be, then you're probably not in the right place to begin with, and you should consider moving on, right? But if you're supported and the leader is there to have you back, then no harm can come of it.
Yeah, I like that. The I was thinking about you mentioning the fact that sometimes in a room, then not everybody is talking and not everybody has a voice. And I'm just thinking, if you ask people generally, how was that meeting? How did that meeting go? The people that say that was a great meeting are the people that actually felt that they were heard and listened to, and they had a voice. And if people come out of the meetings, so glad this meeting is done or the session is done, it's actually because they were not valued, didn't have something to say, and they weren't recognized in the meeting. So yeah, for those of you that are out there doing meetings and leadership stuff, here's some great tips here. I'd like to move on. Oh, Jesus! I realize we've gone for a while. I'd like to move on. Maybe we can finish this off with excellence, and you're quite passionate about that. It's not a topic that we've discussed at length on this podcast, and I would just like us to explore that a little bit more. Tell us why this is important to you.
It's I saw it on your list of available topics and thought, I often don't see this as something that is an option that you can choose. The Australian culture is perhaps a little bit different to other cultures in the world, where we have this thing which is referred to as tall poppy syndrome, as which, if you stand above the rest, sometimes there's envy and jealousy and what have you. So often excellence is not encouraged or not rewarded on the with the consequence of potential alienation or separation from the group. So it's a very touchy topic, and equally excellence can also be touchy in the sense that sometimes we hand out ribbons and awards to people for what sometimes feels like made up reasons as well. And it really creates a disingenuous incentive for people to contribute or do things, because then they're getting hit, with things where they don't even know what they did to deserve or earn it in the first place. And it sends mixed messaging, right? So,
Yeah.
But excellence is one where it's really a mantra or a way of thinking, which is, and I mentioned themes of this earlier on in our chat around, is this really the best solution, or can we be doing something differently, or really challenging the status quo and being encouraged to challenge the status quo. Change and excellence for me have so many overlaps, and excellence is something that we should strive towards. If we're not bringing our best version of ourselves, if we're not waking up every day and wanting to improve from yesterday, then what's the point of it? Like, why do companies and conglomerates and governments and organizations exist? Like, what's their purpose, if not to achieve more tomorrow than they've done today? And that could be in the form of higher profit margins, could be in the form of growth, could be in the form of customer satisfaction, could use many metrics to measure excellence, or to measure the effectiveness of what you as an organization and team is doing in the space. And for me, I've typically been reprimanded on my report cards as a kid for challenging too much. That's often a theme that was an observation made for many teachers. And the ones that I gelled with the most, and actually one of them, Mr. Slaughter, he was actually from South Africa. I think he might have been from Cape Town. He was my graphics teacher, for example. Very awesome teacher. Anyone that had him would have loved being in his presence. And the ones that respected or accepted the challenge, I think were the ones that I saw more as a mentor. And the reason being that they were listening to a different perspective. And equally, those were the classes that I achieved excellence in as well, because the dialogue and the challenge and the ability to challenge the status quo was enabled. If that makes sense, and
it does.
for those reasons, I've really taken that into industry in terms of extracting from people, what are the things that aren't quite working, that perhaps aren't being said or aren't said enough, or when they are being said, people aren't being listened to. And perhaps you and I, as consultants, we are able to leverage this more, because we create an environment where we have no real vested interest in, what has or hasn't been said in the past. We're interested when we deal with people to understand what can be said now. This is the opportunity to gather the information. And I think people naturally want to open up to you as an outsider coming in to work with their team or amongst their team, or you bring a team to help their team. They see this as an opportunity where they're almost encouraged for the first time, sometimes in a long time, to be able to say what they feel. And to me, that's an avenue to achieve excellence. Like, it's a vehicle to get there. It's getting the current situation understood and fleshing out where perhaps the challenges or concerns lie to enable that.
I love that example of excellence. I actually never thought about it in that context. I was thinking, when you started picking the topic, I was thinking, we're going to talk about personal branding and doing your best, but really, I like that approach, because I've actually we're currently working on a big project as a team with multidisciplinary group of people, and there's lots of collaboration with our clients and lots of iterations. But I'm telling you what, we are producing an excellent result. I mean, it's a study to actually take a mine in. It's a final feasibility study, and it's taking the mine into execution. But the study is so good, the quality of the work, because of the, call it the collaboration, and the many inputs and the many sessions, is so good that there's so much confidence that this will be achieved and this project will succeed and deliver what it plans to do. And it's because of excellence. And the excellence actually is exactly what you've just mentioned. It's a result of the many inputs, and the many back and forths and presentations and questions and challenging the status quo, as you mentioned. Why are we doing this? Is there a better way? There's another way. And we pivoted so many times on this project in so many areas of a mine design and a plant and whatever. But that it actually is a really good product. And yeah, I echo every word you're saying there. I like that.
That's really warming. That's honestly really warming to hear that is what's happening. And there's a famous quote. My dad used to say this to me as a kid, and might be Henry Ford, but don't quote me on that. And which is, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. And it's so true. The perception of what will succeed and what won't succeed often carries more weight than the objectivity of it. And if you and this client have got to a point where the perception is good from all parties involved, that means that every party contributing to it, even when the decision is made to enter execution, the feasibility, the budgeting, the investors, everything's lined up to make it work. That means that the horsepower and the magnitude behind the team to deliver it is so much more advanced than if that perception wasn't there. That even if it was a potentially not the best choice, right? And I'm not saying it's not the best choice, but you've got so much buy-in and willpower of the people that they will see obstacles as mere distraction that they'll move through or move around or clean up, or they'll do it in such a way that you won't even notice or hear about them in execution, because the effect of the many will outweigh the effect of the few that would otherwise be the alternative. So that's a really encouraging outcome to hear. And I would say that's the message. That's another message to give to younger selves or the younger folk is check the buy-in, check the pulse. Get the messaging to the point where everyone wants a piece of the action. I remember a similar story. When I got asked to come across to BHP, I was asked to deliver a project. I think that was like 9 years, sort of went nowhere. And every stakeholder I met, it was just words of doom and gloom coming out of their mouth talking about this project. And I thought to myself, I've never heard this much negative press around something that effectively hasn't moved anywhere in 9 years. And we managed to move it. We got 11 departments to agree. We got funding. We got vendors lined up. We got products developed. We got maintenance and operational staff on board. What was doom and gloom at the beginning and almost like Voldemort, in the sense of no one wanted to speak about it, became something where people go, hey, I worked on it. Hey, I was part of it. Hey, I was, in the civil engineering team, for example, or whatever it might be. And that transformation of mindset is that should be what we stand for.
Yeah.
That when you walk away feeling like you've done everything you can, and the team feels like they've done everything they can, that's the time where you say, let's take a breather and let's start prepare for the next one. That's the magical moment. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, love that. I think our time is up. We do respect our listeners in terms of the time slot. Benjamin, any final words? Thank you so much for today, but any final words before we close off?
Really, the final words are for your audience. for this podcast material that will go out to YouTube and the topics that we've covered. I'll periodically check, in time what the audience has said. But if we could encourage them to provide feedback, maybe challenge what we've discussed today, offer their own suggestions and ideas in the comments, I'd love to see who we reach and how we reach them and what we start to hear back from them.
I love that. So you've heard it. You've heard the man. Give us some feedback. Let us. How do people get hold of you, by the way? Through LinkedIn?
Yeah, so you can reach Slinger Management Group on LinkedIn. We have a website as well, which I'm happy to provide you the link for the particulars of the video as well. We have a contact form there. You can reach me directly on LinkedIn. Always open to establishing a line of communication. And our details are all on the website, how to get in contact via WhatsApp and what have you as well.
Okay. Well, there you go. Thanks a lot, Benjamin. Thanks, everybody. Don't go away. We're gonna wrap up as we normally do every week. Benjamin, thank you so much for today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing your pearls of wisdom. We appreciate you. All the best for your consulting and what you're doing and helping businesses with their people and keeping people in mind. And all the best. We wish you all the best.
Thanks, Christo. Have a good evening.
Thanks, man. Well, there we go. Let's wrap up for today. So 3 things I want to highlight that I took away from today, apart from the others, is first of all, have the courage to ask difficult questions. Secondly, excellence is a product of collaboration. And then finally, failure is part of innovation. Thanks for listening this week. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your mining. Cheers.
The Mining Coach is part of Comena Consulting. If your company is in need of technical study support, due diligence studies, business improvement projects, or business and senior leadership coaching, why don't you contact us directly by clicking on the show notes and following the links that will connect you to us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your mining. Cheers.